Welcome back to the Grand Solar Minimum channel. Today is Monday, October 8th, 2018. Thank you for tuning in once again. Take a look at our solar wind speeds. Right now we're sitting at a 539.1 kilometers per second with a density of 6.8. Looking at our sun, we do not have any sunspots, making that 3 days in a row, putting us now over the 161-day mark without sunspots. We are accelerating very fast. Let's take a look at this, by the way, guys. This was from our G1 storm that we had the other day. Remarkable aurora photos here. And also we had a chance today as well for another G1 storm. Right now the KP is sitting at 2 and our 24-hour max was at a 4. So honestly, from what I've looked at, the charts that I've looked at, the opportunity for the storms have come and gone, as I will show you here. The KP indices from October 7th through currently. And as you see in the very beginning parts of October 8th, we were sitting at a 5, which was storm levels. That was actually, my bad, that was late October 7th. And then October 8th, we have seen a fluctuation between 3 and 4. And right now we are at a 2. So this is maybe a possible indication of lower activity, and thus we will not see any geomagnetic storms from this particular disturbance. And here is our solar X-ray flux. Not a whole lot going on. Solar proton flux again. So we will keep our eyes on this as well, but I'll take a look at our SDO in motion real quick, and let's take a look at our current coronal hole that is turning away from us. And we have another coronal hole that's forming now on the eastern part of our star, which is right in this section right here. This looks like it could bring us some increased solar wind activity. Watching a possible area of activity, but very, very, very weak, and it actually looks like it's diminishing as it becomes closer to Earth facing. And looking at the furthest part of the eastern limb, as of right now, still not sure if there's any activity that is developing, but we will also keep our eyes on that as our sun will remain blank for at least a couple more days. Take a look at our TSI readings for September 29th, 2018. Actually, this is for the 30th of September. We were at a 1360.683. Let's get us up to speed here with Hurricane Michael. Here are some of the points that we're going to talk about today. Michael is forecast to intensify as it tracks into the Gulf of Mexico. It will threaten the northeastern Gulf Coast by Wednesday, potentially as a major hurricane. Storm surge, damaging winds, and heavy rain are likely to impact along the northeastern Gulf Coast. Hurricane warnings and storm surge warnings have been issued along the Gulf Coast. Heavy rain and strong winds will spread farther inland across parts of the southeast after landfall. Says here, Hurricane Michael will continue to intensify in this forecast to strike the Florida Panhandle as a Category 3 with dangerous storm surge flooding, destructive winds, and flooding rainfall. Michael will also bring heavy rain and strong winds to other parts of southeastern United States after it moves inland. This could develop into a potentially catastrophic event for the northeastern Gulf Coast, says the National Weather Service. It is currently centered about 30 miles northwest of western tip of Cuba and is moving northward. Outer bands from Michael are already soaking Florida Keys, and total rainfalls of 2 to 4 inches are likely through Tuesday, and a few localized areas could see at least 6 inches of rain. A wind gust of 55 miles an hour was measured at the National Weather Service in Key West, Florida, late Monday afternoon in association with Michael's outer rain bands. And Weather.com, I really don't like to give them props, but here they have everything mapped out pretty good. This was probably the best set of information I could find about the upcoming storm that we're expecting to be impacted from by Wednesday. And here we have all the tropical storm watches and warnings and hurricane watches and hurricane warnings. Panama City, Tallahassee, and Pensacola, you guys are in the bullseye right now. Tampa, you're on a tropical storm watch as Cedar Key is under the tropical storm warning. Mobile, Alabama, not out of the woods yet as well, and parts of New Orleans, the very eastern tip, you might be affected as well with Mississippi. here are the storm surge watch alerts right now. And as you can see from Panama City all the way up to Tampa, we're looking at storm surge warnings and just watches in Pensacola and Tampa Bay itself. This track, and a lot of forecasters are saying Category 3 right now. And at this particular track, I can understand why they would be predicting a Cat 3, because we are looking at much warmer waters in the Gulf Coast right now than usual. And as you see our national radar weather map here from the National Weather Service, we have a long line from basically from Canada to Mexico of flood watches right now, flash flood watches. And then we also see the purple of winter weather advisories. But let's stay on topic here with Michael. And this is a radar of all the available moisture for this particular storm. Now we understand why we're looking at flood watch across from Canada to Mexico into southern Texas, northern Wisconsin. Lots of moisture. Here's Michael starting to affect the southeast already. We also want to mention as well, along with this, and I'll get to all the specifics here in a second, but we got to talk really quick about Cuba and Mexico impact. A hurricane warning is in effect for the Pinar del Rio province in western Cuba. Hurricane conditions are possible. There through Monday evening, so they're about out of the woods. Tropical storm warnings have been posted for the Isle of Youth, Cuba, and Mexico's northeast Yucatan Peninsula, including Cozumel. Rainfall total is expected from 4 to 8 inches, locally 12 inches, are forecast over western Cuba with 1 to 2 inches over the Yucatan Peninsula. These downpours could contribute to life-threatening flash flooding and mudslides, particularly in areas of mountainous terrain, which we know there are plentiful there in Cuba and Mexico. So here we go. Let's talk about some of the timings and the specifics of this storm. Landfall is most likely to occur somewhere between the Florida Panhandle and the Big Bend of Florida Wednesday into Wednesday night. Depending on how quickly or slowly Michael begins to turn northeastward, landfall could be as early as late Tuesday night or delayed until early Thursday morning. Conditions may begin to deteriorate as early as Tuesday evening on the northeastern Gulf Coast. After landfall, Michael will then move farther inland across the southeastern U.S. into late week with gusty winds and heavy rain. Michael could enhance rainfall for the mid-Atlantic, southeastern New England as well later this week. The intensity, they're forecasting this is expected to be a Category 3. And here is a graph down at the bottom where we are seeing the tropical force wind probabilities. And as far as the direct hit of the winds itself, Tallahassee, Pensacola, you guys look like Tallahassee is definitely in the bullseye of the tropical force wind that we will be experiencing from this. It says hurricane force winds 74 plus miles an hour are expected to arrive in the hurricane warning area on the Florida Gulf Coast by Wednesday and are possible in the hurricane watch area on the northern Gulf Coast by that time. Tropical storm force winds 39 miles plus per hour are expected to arrive in the hurricane warning area on the Florida Gulf Coast by Tuesday night or early Wednesday. Continues to talk about widespread power outages, major tree damage, structural damage will occur along the path of Michael, near and just inland from where it makes landfall on the Florida Panhandle. And you see the intense, the brighter purple that is going to be the most likely for the area of power outages, but they're not counting out areas like Columbia and Charleston and Raleigh, North Carolina, because we already have saturated soil from the flooding there. Here's some of the predictions for the storm surges that we're going to see from this storm, possibly. Indian Pass to Cedar Key could look at 8 to 12 feet of storm surge. Cedar Key to Crystal River could get 6 to 8 feet of storm surge. Other areas, Crystal River to the Anaclo River, 4 to 6 feet. So here is the chart here as well. And they also break it down to the timing of the highest of the tides for Wednesday and Thursday in a few locations. The storm surge will, the threat area. Here is what they're looking at. Panama City, 10:30 p.m. on Wednesday, 11 p.m. on Thursday. And you guys can check all this out here in the description. One other thing I wanted to mention too before I leave from this. the rainfall that we're going to get in Columbia and parts of North Carolina near Wilmington and Cape Hatteras and Raleigh, that yellow area of 3 to 5 inches is already adding to the problems that we're seeing. And also, we are being told that there's possibility of the southeastern part of New England could also see some heavy rain from this going into the weekend. So we will keep our eyes on this storm, and Wednesday will be a good day for GSM channel because I will probably be available throughout the day to give any kind of updates if this storm does appear to strengthen higher than a Category 3. At that point, seeing a Cat 4 this late in the game would be something to talk about, and we would break through with any kind of updates that would be available at that point in time of the storm. But we'll take a look at it one more time over at Mike's Hurricane weather page here, spaghettimodels.com, and we see the spaghetti models here for this storm. A lot of people are in agreement that Panhandle, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina are going to get blitzed with rain and wind. There is one track that takes it into eastern Pennsylvania, into the New York City area, but that is only one model. The most of them, the closer they are together, the better idea we have on this storm's track. And I think it's coming up pretty much unanimously. People are agreeing where this storm is headed. But I wanted to see if I can take a look at here over the last 24 hours of this radar, as this storm is really starting to take shape now and getting its act together as it enters into warmer waters. And, we take a look at this region right here, zooming in just a little bit, the Gulf Coast. We have a little bit warmer water, not quite as warm as it is closer to the Mexico side of the Gulf, but still favorable enough for intensity. But I'm not sure if I'm seeing the intense of a Category 3 or higher at this point, taking a look at our current situation in our oceans. So we'll keep our eyes on that as well. Moving along, here's something that we can cool off to a little bit. Aside from a few light dustings earlier this season, Colorado mountains today marks the first snow for much of the state. It started snowing as early as 7 a.m. in parts of Colorado. Temperatures are expected to linger around the mid-30s along the Front Range for much of the day, with a low of 29 degrees tonight. And ski resorts definitely celebrating here, as there are various pictures and videos here on this link. You guys can check them out. Lots of snow falling. It's early, but, I'm seeing a lot more. And here's the thing. We're not seeing a lot of leaves on the ground yet. So a lot of these trees still have heavy leaf coverage right now. And we all know what happens when we get these heavy snowstorms. The leaves are heavy. Branches start to break. Power lines can fall. Yet we haven't seen a storm like that just yet, but to see some of this early snow, and we haven't had our leaves drop to the ground yet, definitely keep our eyes open for that. But right now, these are just minor 2 to 4 inches of snow, nothing too major at this point. And here's another area where we're going to talk about snow, southwestern Montana. Next weather maker arrives Tuesday into Wednesday for southwest Montana. Another storm system will dive from the Pacific Northwest into central Idaho and clip southwest Montana. The biggest concern is for measurable snow over mountain passes and travel impacts for your Wednesday morning commute. Areas of the greatest concern will be along the Montana-Idaho state line. However, plan on mountain passes locally to see snow and possible icy roads Tuesday evening into Wednesday. They break it down here for temperatures, the highs and the lows. It does look like that this activity of snow and freezing rain is going to happen overnight hours into the early morning hours, but temperatures should rise enough to melt whatever accumulation is going to be on those pavements and sidewalks. Now, I'm not saying that some areas in the grass won't still be covered in snow, but for the most part, this is just going to be a nuisance for the Wednesday morning commute here, and that will be a date of October 10th. Gusty winds in Davis County as valley rain, mountain snow. Here we are in Utah. Storm systems exiting Utah Monday will create rain in the valleys and snow in the mountains. UDOT's warning for gusty crosswinds in effect from until 8 a.m. this morning, where they had seen gusty winds up over 45 miles per hour. Motorists on the I-15 from Bountiful to Kaysville and on US 89 from Kaysville to Bountiful are urged to use extra caution this past morning. So a mess in the west right now. Colorado, Utah, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming. People getting ready for the upcoming ski season for sure. And what does this all mean? Well, let's talk about this real quick. Arizona sky wake up. Now, this was Sunday, but just talking about how we've seen the monsoon rains rolling through, and then in the same breath, we're talking about snow. Here's a story out of Phoenix. Weather in the valley or up north, an oversight storm left surprises for Arizonians Sunday morning. Flash flood watches were issued for parts of northern Arizona after a rainy Saturday. Those showers continued overnight, mingled with a cold front, dropping temperatures and turning rain into snow. The National Weather Service in Flagstaff measured up to 4.5 inches of rain at Snowbowl. In addition, 1 inch in Belmont and 2 inches in Williams. The Arizona Department of Transportation says to be careful driving up north Sunday morning. There was lots of snow and slick roads. Snow accumulated on State Route 87 north. And just by looking at this picture, they don't put any numbers, but I'd have to say that's at least an inch to 2 inches, maybe 2.5 inches of snow of unplowed roads here. That cold front triggered showers and thunderstorms in the valley too. Just before 7 a.m., the National Weather Service in Phoenix said that showers from midnight on already broke the daily rainfall record of October 7th, measured at 0.41 inches of rain. The previous record was 0.30, set back in 1924. We'll leave the link in the description. And just talking about records real quick, and before I go on with this little story here, I had a person comment in the comment section of one of our videos, and he's kicking rocks, basically minimizing the articles and the science that we reveal on this channel. But he's talking about how hot it is in Atlanta, Georgia, and I think a lot of people do this. And I actually spoke to someone a couple days ago about the same thing. But it's funny how people think when they have records breaking in their own backyard that, well, just because it's doing this in my backyard, we're warming. And that would be like me telling you guys that, oh, well, it's cold up here, so it's cooling for sure because we broke so much cold records today. And I think people need to understand that records are anomalies. And they have no representation of the overall yearly or global temperatures or averages or anything like that. They're just anomalies. And the faster that we explain that to people, the masses that believe in the we're responsible for global warming crowd, we have to start letting people realize that we're talking about anomalies. When you hear about records being broken in one part of the United States, or even in half of the country, it's an anomaly. Wherever it's hot, it's cold somewhere else. I mean, BC, Canada, Alberta, Canada, Calgary, all of them, they can tell you about that. It was hot in the deep south, but it was damn sure cold somewhere else. And people don't take into consideration that these temperatures kind of seesaw each other to average. And that's why when we look at graphs like this, it's so little in movement. If you really think about it, since February of 2016, we're only talking about 0.73 degrees Celsius of dropping temperatures globally. That's less than a degree in 2 years. So I think the quicker we can start helping people getting off of that way of thinking that just because there's a record that's broken in your backyard doesn't mean that's affecting globally everywhere, that people are experiencing the same thing that you're experiencing. Just because you've never experienced it doesn't mean that the rest of the world has or hasn't. For instance, you hear people talk about the 100-year flood. Well, that's because it happened 100 years ago, and it's one of those once-in-a-100-year type events. And then when you hear people say that 1-in-500-year event happened the other day, we've had 2 1-in-500-year events happen in the last 8 years. It's got to be global warming. So let me ask you something. What caused all that 500 year ago flood in the first place? 500 years ago, we weren't running cars or factories or anything like that. We weren't burning CO2 into the atmosphere like we are now. So what caused all of that flooding 500 years ago? Or 1,000 years ago, when man wasn't even supposedly around to make an impact? Now, I can actually answer that question. Agriculture did cause a global warming period. But my point is that this was natural. That the farmers had overplanted, that we overthought it, that we overshot it with our crops. And it was so good that it increased the agriculture industry, caused warming during a period of time. But what's the excuse from 500 years ago when we didn't have factories and cars running? So I guess what I'm saying is, let's just keep it focused and remember, just because it's a record-breaking month in your backyard, that's such a small area compared to the rest of the world. And you guys can go to royspencer.com and take a look at the entire layout. He has numbers listed, not just for this year, but from 2016 and on. He actually compares what the global temperature anomaly has been in each part of the globe, the southern hemisphere, the northern hemisphere, the United States, Australia. He breaks it all down. So just remind your friends next time they say, oh, it's been record-breaking this summer up here. Just say, well, look, that's just an anomaly. It's not a long-term event. It's just an anomaly. Okay, glad I cleared that up. All right, so some bad news for Mars-bound astronauts. Cosmic rays damage your GI tract, intestinals. They did some study here on mice here in New York, and basically they tested mice with highly, I guess we could say, artificial cosmic rays by heavily charged ions, and it revealed that it causes damage to your intestines, that the cells that create layers on its own, like a 3 to 5 day process, it actually interrupts that, so it makes more possibility of inflammatory disease as well. Irritable bowel syndrome, as if we need any help with that, but also the long-term effects of not just the GI tract, but radiation sickness and leukemia, several types of cancer, and just a plethora of trouble here. And, they list the link to the study. I think it's right down here. Yeah, right here. The research was published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, United States of America. You can click here and take a look at the study yourself. And here's my hope, that we are actually reading a paper that was true research for the true purpose of an answer. Can we travel to Mars? Can we go to deep space? We've been to the moon, so can we go further? Can we go to Mars? Can we go further than that? Can our bodies handle it? And my hope is that this research was done in all honesty, that we've got some work to do medically to come up with a drug that will prevent these damages because of deep space radiation. Or is it possible that the consensus out there is trying to scare people away from deep space travel, because what you'll find outside of Earth will just blow your damn mind and probably be a whistleblower to every life secret out there? I don't know. But I have a feeling either way, the dangers of space are in more ways than one. And since we kind of cover grand solar minimum stuff, cosmic rays, we've talked about the increased radiation just a few days ago about flight crew and the pilots. So to me, I'm going to lean on the side that this is true research, and that their findings are pretty heavy on the side that we already know, that if our people that are traveling by airline, and also they've updated a new study as well earlier in the year where It used to be where we could stay 1,000 days in space without any harm to our bodies, just at the International Space Station. Oh, they've dropped that to 700 days now. So as we continue to get into this grand solar minimum and cosmic rays continue to increase, which, by the way, is why we're seeing all these 4 to 8 inches of rain dropping in one day storms, increased particles, highly charged particles at that in our atmosphere, which interact with water vapor, cloud nucleation. It gets so heavy that it just drops it in buckets. I showed a video, actually I talked about a video that was taken somewhere in China where it looked like the cloud was just sitting on the road, and it was like a wall of cloud just sitting on the road. Truck drivers pulled over, taking video of it, not knowing what to do. Some say that they couldn't go past through it because of all the moisture that was inside of those clouds, so it wasn't safe to drive through them. But again, high amounts of cosmic galactic rays are to blame. So I'll leave the link in the description. You guys can check out the article and the study that is linked to it as well. And once again, we hit another timeline from this man here. And I can only imagine what he's thinking about right here. Boy, am I rolling the dice once again. I said this in 2006. We've got 10 years before we see an all blue event that the World Trade Center would be underwater and that there would be no ice in the poles. And we are 2018. Sea ice back on the mend once again. As we get into cooler areas up north, we will see ice actually gaining. But here's the thing. These folks are telling everyone once again a timeline, and that we have now till about 2030 to save the world, or that's it. It's done. It's over. Same of the same stuff that he said before. Gavin Schmidt. I agree with the AB tag agenda, I guess was what he's saying, that framing this report as we only have 10 years to act, as done by the Washington Post in their headline, is neither correct nor helpful. Making better decisions on emissions is always going to be helpful, whether it's now or 5 years or in 20 years. And I guess a lot of people had something to say. Of course, you had CNN. Governments from around the world must take rapid, far-reaching, and unprecedented changes in all aspects of the society to avoid disastrous levels of global warming, says stark new report from the Global Scientific Authority on Climate Change. Stand by. So I guess what I'm trying to make a point here, several articles talking about this new timeline that's being set once again. And this is all coming from this report that we had talked about also with October Surprise. But these are some of the headlines here. Understanding global warming of 1.5 degrees Celsius. Human activities are estimated to have caused approximately 1 degree Celsius of global warming above pre-industrial levels, with a likely range of 0.8 to 1 to 0.2 degrees Celsius. Global warming is likely to reach 1.5 to between 2030 and 2052. Now, I wanted to share that little part real quick because I think a lot of us here know the opposite of what's to come in 2030. And that is another weak solar cycle in 25, weaker, 25 to 35% weaker than the one we just came out of, before by the time we hit 2030 and we see where our sunspot activity will bottom out. And multi-decades, back to back, each time we go through these cycles, lower solar activity correlates to cooling temperatures here on Earth. And that's what we're getting right now. That's what we're in the very beginning. And that's why I've always said we're in the very beginning of this. This is not something that's going to happen overnight. I have the patience to wait for 2030 because it's going to be the exact opposite of what these reports are saying right now. The exact opposite. This graph right here will nowhere be above baseline by 2030. No way at all. I will gladly make that prediction. This graph here will look entirely different by the time we're in 2030. Averaging temperatures around here, possibly lower. So go ahead, AGW. Go ahead and set all of your records and all your predictions and all your sea level rise cries out there. By 2100, we're going to have all this sea level rise and temperature rise of 3.5 degrees Celsius. But what they don't tell you, it could be a 3.5 degree Celsius temperature rise at some point in this century. But at what point? After we'd already dropped 3 or 4 degrees Celsius already? So we're back at average baseline temperatures by the end of 2100? I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if we're back exactly where we were 100 years from now. But some aren't saying that we're going to come out of our minimum anytime soon. Some are saying 100 to 400 years. So I just find it very bold for these people and all of these scientists that got on board with this. I read it. There's 6,000 people that got together on this IPCC report, and they're saying, oh yeah, this global warming of 1.5, we've got to do something because if 2030 hits, we're done. There's nothing else to do with it. I guess it's just going to take time. They're going to see through time. And these are just articles I'm highlighting now here in 2018. And hopefully we have technology like this in 2030. If a solar flare doesn't take out the grid by then or anything like that, or a catastrophic earthquake rips apart parts of the world, who knows? Point I'm trying to make is that 2030 from now, 10 to 12 years from now, that there are people who are scaring, once again, saying that we're going to continue to rise. So right now we're sitting at 0.14 degrees Celsius above baseline. And they really believe that we're going to be above 1.5 degrees Celsius in 10 years. If we don't do drastic things to change it, we won't be able to avert this. That's what's crazy about this whole story, is that it's out of control. The lying, the misinformation about what's really happening and the actual science is taking place. And if you want to believe in the correlation of CO2 and temperature rise, and you believe that the more CO2 in the atmosphere causes warming, I get it. You look at the charts and you say, oh my God, it's 411 parts per million. It's record levels. And if you believe that narrative of CO2 causing warmer temperatures, then I understand why you are so adamant about it. But if you step back and look at the new research that we've seen over the last 8 to 10 years, where they're finding CO2 is more responsible for cooling and for cloud nucleation. More cloud coverage causes cooling. It doesn't trap heat in. Whatever heat it's trapping in will eventually evaporate into the atmosphere, which, by the way, folks, is a lot colder at 30,000 feet up in the air. So I have a hard time believing that a small area of our atmosphere, our surface temps, are such a small area compared to how high our atmosphere really is. The ceiling that we have. Tens of thousands of feet up into the air that we have temperatures filtering through our atmosphere. So I just, it's such a small number that we impact. And people don't realize the bigger picture, which is the atmosphere is way bigger than they can imagine. And the temperatures are way colder, way colder, 30,000 feet and climbing. So again, if you have cloud coverage from CO2 all the time, say sun doesn't even come out for a few days, 10 days, whatever, you're going to see some significant cooling because all that heat that was trapped at the surface has escaped through the atmosphere after so many days. You're not getting any fresh TSI to the surface. The clouds are reflecting that back into space. And over a several day period, you're going to notice temperatures cooling. just like they're trying to tell us for the upcoming future of this minimum and then some. Over time, continuous decades of low solar activity correlates with temperatures cooling the planet. Right now, we know solar cycle 24 is going to be a week in the last 150 years. They're predicting cycle 25 to be 25% weaker. And there are some folks saying that we won't even come out of 26 for a very long time. This is not really serious, but I wanted to bring it up because it's ridiculous, and I love What's Up With That. They do great work, and they had to bring this one out too. I understand why. You're reading this right, people. Global warming is now shrinking your balls. According to a research done here in California, men, your balls are shrinking because of, and this is here we go, the correlation they're making. Well, look, the sperm concentration in men from the mid-1970s through currently have dropped. They continue to drop. You see the drop? And then they look at this atmospheric CO2. Here's more fear porn, folks. Oh, well, that's got to be it. That's really high carbon dioxide, CO2. That's why, yeah. So our balls are getting smaller because look what's rising. It's CO2. It's warming us and making our balls smaller. How about let's go ahead and blame this on the EMFs? All of the Wi-Fi and the 5G technology we have out there, the cell phones that you sit in your pocket all day long. I'm okay with people who think that has something to do with men who have low sperm counts. But now, this is probably the most ridiculous correlation of the year, in my opinion. And what is it doing? Well, for those average Joe out there who aren't too privy with climate information, you know, your normal guy who watches the news on his favorite local news station and, you know, and whatever else he likes to do. And he's going to look at this briefly and say, oh, my God, global warming is out of control. We have to do more to stop it. I don't want my balls to get small. So it might scare some. It might make men laugh and think there's no way that's true. But there are a lot of naive people out there. And this is an article, a headline, a scare that is pointed right at these folks who would be a little naive to believe such correlation exists. And the fact that it comes from researchers from California, considering what Jerry Brown is doing, he's poisoning the well, I think, out there. Everybody's getting stupid, in my opinion. Arnold Schwarzenegger, who is drunk on this man-made global warming theory as well. To me, that part of the country, when it comes to climate research, is becoming less and less credible, in my opinion. I'll leave the article in the description. You guys can check this out. Again, this was just something I thought, wow, I have to mention it. And commit to the Paris Agreement, or more climate scientists might cry. All of these weird comments from people that attended this event in South Korea. They're not clear on what's going on. They don't understand this new report by the IPCC. And you know, I call these Rick Perry comments, because Rick Perry is some kind of, he represents something with energy, and his, you know, he wants to find green energy, but yet he talks about, it's weird. He doesn't believe that man makes global warming, but he also talks about how we need to cut back on fossil fuel use. So not quite sure what he's trying to say. But again, I think a lot of these political figures throughout the world are also confused, is because there's so much evidence going around now. And a lot of people that at one point in time that bought into this Paris Treaty are now getting tired of it because of the money they're paying. They're not hitting their targets. They're not finding ways to make it work for their country affordably. Somebody mentioned something on, hey, that's another thing. I saw something on Fox News, a commercial that paid for silver and the correlation of solar panels, and that there's more silver being used to make these panels, so it's making the precious metals of silver worth more money. And I thought this was interesting because the cost of silver, and all these companies out there are mandating solar panels. Like California, if you build a new house in California, you have to have solar panels put in at your house. And they're trying to say that these panels have inner workings of silver, and that silver is going to be a hot commodity because of this, because it's going to save the world. And I just find it, just disheartening once again. That there's certain news medias that I trust with the news, and then you see commercials like that, and they got it halfway right, but not all the way right. Solar panels would be a great idea if we weren't heading into a solar minimum, a record solar minimum, a minimum that could be bigger than what we've ever seen in recorded history. I think everybody's confident to say that we're going to have a Dalton-like minimum, for sure. There's a bigger pool of people now saying that it could be as bad as the Mondra minimum. And then there is a slight pool of people that are saying that this is a possibility of something worse. These solar panels, the waste, the e-waste that it's created, a new way of getting rid of solar panels and all this new age green technology waste cost more, which creates more regulations with the EPA, with labor boards all over the country. So you get tax breaks for these solar panels in certain parts of the country. But to dispose of this is a lot more expensive than just throwing out an old stereo system that doesn't work anymore. And also, these green products are driving up the price of real energy like coal, natural gas, our electricity bills. Everything has increased even more. And last year during the winter, early part of January, late part of December actually, end of January, what saved the New England area from having rolling blackouts in the middle of this 5 to 15 degree temperature high over a several span of days was the fact they had to fire up coal plants all over the Northeast to keep the grid intact and online. So we'll have to see in the future how much of this climate nonsense of warming will continue to actually hold its weight, because it just seems like they're digging themselves a hole by making predictions and setting new goals for years. And how convenient for them to set a year that's 12 years away. And I'm sure they'll find a way to blame global warming for the cooling that's getting ready to come. They'll say, well, it was, global warming caused it to extreme cool. Guys, look at this GFS forecast model. And there's a reason why we're seeing this big line of flash flooding. That's possible. Lots of moisture set up here over the northern plains into Iowa, Wisconsin, which has been waterlogged most of the year. The back end of that, Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, parts of Utah, we're getting some snow. We've already talked about that. Into Tuesday, into Wednesday is the heavier days as that system kind of hovers around for a little bit. And then we get another system from the northwest that comes in and ushers just a few more snow showers. But that's just the west part of this. Let's take a look at our storm, Michael. Tuesday, he's making an approach in the middle of the Gulf where it could intensify just a little bit more, because in this region right here, we do have warmer waters. But here's where I think that we'll see a possibility a little bit more weakening than what the GFS is suggesting. We got to watch for wind shear and also water temperatures that aren't quite as warm as they were on Tuesday for this storm. But as it makes landfall, which right now it's lining up to all the predictions that we just talked about on weather.com. I mean, look at this map. From southern Canada up near Minnesota, actually, if you go from Minnesota all the way down to Alabama, we have a stream of moisture from two different systems that's widespread over much of the eastern part of the United States. Ohio, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts. You guys are dry for the time being, but let's watch this storm in motion. And as it makes landfall, this moisture moves east, southwest Ohio River area. Might pick up some heavy rain, 1 to 2 inches possible in a quick amount of time. This storm is busting butt. And by the time we reach Thursday, we're in South Carolina, racing into North Carolina. And look at the amount of rain that this storm is. But there's oranges and reds, which indicate somewhere between 8 to 12 inches of rain, once again possible. And this last run right here, as it makes its exit through Virginia, is not looking good for an area who's already waterlogged. And then we got another storm approaching here in the Baja area that makes landfall as Michael is taking off from the coast. We get another low pressure system that starts as a hurricane that reaches Arizona once again, into New Mexico, into Colorado, and mainly stays a rainmaker as Michael is long gone and the weather tries to clear up just a little bit, as this is the quietest that we've seen our weather map in several days. So the mid-month, we will see that cold front right here finally make its way into the Ohio Valley by October 15th. And this is just a mini one. As we go through the 17th, we see high pressure dominating the East Coast, keeping us dry all over. In fact, this is welcome news right now to a lot of folks here in the United States, especially after Michael. And as we get into late October, into the 20th, we still stay dry. We start to see some activity picking up once again across the middle part of our country with a big low pressure system in Canada, driving rain across the northern plains into Texas. And then we have another possible disturbance here in the Gulf Coast in the same regions of the Panhandle of Florida, up through South Carolina and North Carolina. But this time, this storm looks like the worst of it stays in the ocean, but still potential for heavy rain once again for this region 15 days after Michael hits. So another weather maker to keep our eyes on. But look at this. This is at the end of October, and we see another cold front dipping down once again into the Ohio Valley. So we get 2 blasts of cold air, or colder air, I should say. So let's take a look and see what this translates into temperatures as far as highs and lows. Looks like we're looking at a lot of 40s and 30s towards the end of this month. Now, we have the warm weather right now, which is predicted all the way through the 12th to the 15th. According to the GFS, it looks like that cooler weather is going to arrive in the majority parts of this country by the weekend of the 13th. So the 12th, the deep south is going to have that summer heat. But we're going to see more 60s and 70s in the Kentucky and Tennessee Valley. And then Ohio is finally going to start feeling like fall. I know you guys yesterday hit a high of 84. So you guys are ready for some cooler weather, but it gets cool. And the temperatures continue to drop as we get into the 13th. Parts of southwest Ohio are looking at 36 degrees for a low. Freezing in parts of upstate New York. 40s throughout much of the country overnight. And then it warms up a little bit during the day on Sunday into the lower 40s. But look at that cold air pressing its way through into overnight hours. And Monday, we get closer to freezing in a lot of areas on the 15th of October. So right on cue, the first half of the month was forecasted to be warmer, but we get to that midpoint of the October, and we see that colder air pushing through. And the 15th was that first cold front that's going to shoot through. And then here is that second cold front pushing in right here towards the end, as a pocket of cold air from Canada, very frigid air, is trying to make its way into the lower 48. And by the end of this run, once again, we'll be looking at temperatures in the 40s and 50s in the Northeast, the Ohio Valley, across the northern plains, and high temperatures in 29-degree range in Wisconsin. So we'll keep our eyes on the upcoming weather, because we've also been told that we are possibly going to be dealing with a polar vortex late this month. So 2 shots of colder air trying to penetrate much of the United States. And for the most part, it looks like it's successful. It is fall, so we should be seeing the 50s and 40s right now. Now, we look at the El Nino 3-4 index, and it does not match the temperature graph that we have here. So still watching this with one eyebrow raised. Nonetheless, it is reporting a temperature of right around a 0.767 above baseline, but that's actually dropping from where it peaked at the 0.8 mark above baseline. Take a look at our current radar before we take off for tonight. We have some rain across the United States from Green Bay all the way back to Odessa, Texas, and into parts of Mexico. So flooding and flash flooding is definitely possible for this area. We're also keeping our eye on Michael as it continues to develop into the Gulf into the next couple of days. Right now forecasted to be a Category 3. We shall see as it gets further into the Gulf. Again, if it tracks just a little bit further west and gets in that warmer part of the waters and stalls out just for a little bit, we could see the possibility of a Cat 3 or slightly higher than that. All right, Mari, I wanted to get you over here to say hello to everybody and check out the chat, how everybody's doing tonight.
Everyone is fabulous tonight, so thank you all for joining me in the chat. You guys are amazing. We have some creative individuals in the chat. How to protect your balls in these trying times, Jake. I mean, makes for a way interesting chat, that article. So thank you, Jake. So anyway, I don't really have a whole lot to report. I'm too damn tired, Jake.
I hear you. Well, and the article with the balls thing, I just thought, I wanted to liven up the chat a little bit. Listen, some of this weather stuff can be boring. Science, blah, blah, blah. I know. I'm making everybody think. You got your boneheads out there who just love the headlines and that's it. And then you got people who actually enjoy understanding why this happens. And then every once in a while, I'd like to throw you guys a curveball and talk about how you can protect your nuts here in the Grand Solar Minimum. So with that being said, thank you once again, everyone, for tuning in to Monday night. We'll be back tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time with some more Grand Solar Minimum news updates and an update on Michael, as well as we should have a better idea of what's happening with landfall, where exactly, and if it's going to intense even, or if it's going to continue to get stronger as time goes by, or will wind shear tear it apart. So we'll see. We're 48 hours away from landfall. Until then, guys, we will talk soon.